Making It Personal with Bishop William Johnson on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson. I'm Jean Till, and on today's show, we're visiting with Christine Hilbert, an artist from Winterset, about the power of prayer during a time of medical treatments. But Bishop, before we get started, what do you have to say today?
Good morning, Jean, in this latter portion of spring and all that we're about there. And so the days of summer are fast upon us, but continuing to offer the sacrament of confirmation. But tonight, actually, we're kind of anticipating here as we prepare the show, but the diaconate ordination of Luis Cabrera. So what a story there. And we look to have him on the show here in the weeks ahead. But he'll be ordained to the transitional diaconate at Christ the King Parish on the south side in Des Moines. So,
and then he'll just have a year or just a few months?
A year and weeks, yeah. So, I could get into the program for priestly formation and the changes that the Vatican mandated and all the various phases and the synthetic phase. But I'll check myself. But he'll have a great formative experience this summer at Corpus Christi Parish in Council Bluffs. So
wonderful.
Take good care of him out there in Council Bluffs. And we know some of the Institute for Priestly Formation men also make their way over and are hosted for not only Memorial Day weekend, but at other opportunities too. So Father Luis Mejia and Father Jake Epstein will be great mentors to him, and there'll be plenty for him to do. Yep. But with the grace of orders, to be able to preach and to baptize and to witness marriages and, of course, all the other things that are part of the life of ministry. Tomorrow I'll be with the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre, kind of a spring event. Okay. And very fitting, I think, on the weekend of the celebration of Corpus Christi. And so I'll be offering a holy hour and reflection on the Eucharist. We can't ever exhaust as much. Jean, you and I have spent a lot of Mondays together at the Holy Hour at the Cathedral, but this will be a special opportunity with those folks. And then we'll follow up with confirmation at St. John and Paul in Altoona later in the afternoon. And then next week, heading out to Orlando, the USCCB spring meeting. I don't know I've ever been in Orlando. Okay. I try not to get caught in the crossfire between Disney chair CEO and Ron DeSantis. I'll try to steer clear of that. No opportunities for any of the theme parks there, but we'll have our spring meeting and some important agenda items.
And nice weather.
Oh, one hopes. And again, I don't bring golf clubs because I don't play golf anymore. But then we'll get a chance to visit Father Guthrie Dolan and his ongoing clinical pastoral education program. So touching base with him also. I'm really looking forward to the time here visiting with Christine. I was just meeting her for the first time here, but it's quite a story. But she stirs me to think and go back to a source that has really spoken to me, even though I am anything but an artist, a kind of mediocre musician and maybe playing with words once in a while. But I thought John Paul's letter to artists, which I commend to all of you, it's one of his shorter messages, shy of 20 pages, but really speaking to things in saying, in shaping a masterpiece, the artist not only summons a work into being, but also in some way reveals his or her own personality by means of it. For the artist, art offers both a new dimension and an exceptional mode of expression for his or her spiritual growth. The artist has a special relationship to beauty. In a very true sense, it can be said that beauty is the vocation bestowed on the artist by the Creator and the gift of artistic talent. And, of course, all that's part of the human experience, including suffering. And Christine has passed through the valley of suffering and continues to do so. But John Paul at one point will say, a figure like Job, to take one example, with his searing and ever-relevant question of suffering, still arouses an interest that is not just philosophical, but literary and artistic as well. And so, the one for whom all things are familiar in humanity, Jesus, I think, shining forth in various ways. And so not just in religious art and the various motifs and themes that Ms. Hilbert takes on, in her work, all of these can be disclosive that for culture and the church, they might be far apart, but art remains a kind of bridge to religious experience. Insofar as it seeks the beautiful as the fruit of an imagination which rises above the everyday, art is by its nature a kind of appeal to the mystery, even when they explore the darkest depths of the soul or the most unsettling aspects of evil. Artists give voice in a way to the universal desire for redemption. So, it's like a glass of fine wine to drink from John Paul II's wisdom, the late great saint. So,
what a great way to encourage us to read the letter from St. John Paul about a letter to the artist. So thank you for bringing that. Hey, when we return, we'll visit with Christine Hilbert from Winterset, and we'll chat about prayer during a time of medical trial and suffering. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Johnson, and on today's show, we're visiting with Christine Hilbert, artist from Winterset.
Ms. Hilbert, if I may presume to call you Christine, but
yes,
we'd appreciate very much you being on. And you listened to me channeling St. John Paul II, but just looking forward to the opportunity as you kind of open up and offer your reflections and things, but your experiences that have been all part of this. When, as we think about your personal identity and your kind of coming to be, when did you begin to think, I'm kind of an artist?
Well, thank you first for having me. I feel so honored to be here. I can honestly say I can remember being like a kindergartner, and I'm an artist, and I've always felt like that. So when I was little, any character in a show or in a book that was an artist was like my favorite character. I can remember drawing for my friends on the playground when we were in elementary school.
With chalk or?
Like pencil, like I'll draw you a ballerina today or whatever. Doing like some sort of a project in fourth grade, and you could pick any person from history that you wanted to be. And I chose Leonardo da Vinci. And as like a fourth grade girl picking a boy, and you had to dress up as the person, like always was my favorite thing. So I kind of always was on that trajectory, even from a really young age.
So kind of seeing forms and things and, not just, trying to, capture them, but infuse them with a layer where you were bringing something out. And
I think you just, when you're artistic or creative in that way, you kind of observe the world in maybe a different kind of way. And what you said in Pope John Paul's letter about beauty is really something that resonated with me, because I think I've always been kind of interested in finding beauty in anything, whether it's a sunset or whether it's, an oil spill on the ground, just always kind of looking and seeking within nature and the everyday for things that are inspiring and beautiful. Something I've always done.
And you're the oldest of 6 siblings, is that correct? Yeah. I mean, now, does the oldest child have time to indulge this, or did your younger siblings appreciate this?
I mean, I don't know. I come from a family of very athletic and very, book smart people. So I'm kind of like the weird creative one who didn't do anything, kind of in the traditional sense. So going to study art and going to art school was always kind of like everybody else is like, what? So I think it probably seemed natural for my personality, but
how are you going to make a living with this?
Oh, we have that conversation a lot. So
because Da Vinci had that engineering side working.
Yeah, and I don't have that part. I just have the creative part.
So eventually, your path, obviously, some schools here in the parochial system.
Yeah, I went to Sacred Heart, and then I went to Dowling, and then I went to Iowa State to study fine art. But first, I had to try out interior design and art education and all of the practical sides of creative field, and kind of just settled on finally, no, I really just want to be an artist, which then was met with, well, how are you going to make any money? And I'll figure it out. So.
And that voice was that of your parents or your mentors and advisors?
My dad especially. My dad was a physical therapist, and so he's very practical. And so he was always kind of trying to help me, guide me in the more practical side of a creative journey. And my brain is very fanciful and, I'm inspired by the world around me and just wanting to kind of capture those things. And my mom was always very encouraging of whatever I wanted to do. And my dad still was, but he was just more trying to help me figure out how are you going to use the skill for a livelihood.
But even as a physical therapist, with all props to Vesalius, the great anatomist, classical anatomist, knowing form, knowing how the pieces go together. So, and obviously on a practical level as well. Things were woven into stories for you. I mean, it isn't just the visual medium, but situating things. There's a story to be told there.
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
Yeah, and at Sacred Heart and at Dowling, was this nurtured or in any way, or did you kind of have to put it on hold?
No, I was lucky enough to at Sacred Heart. I took you have art classes that you get to take, and that was always my favorite thing. And then at Dowling, all of my electives were creative based, so I got to make and create and learn about different things than I never, tried different mediums that I'd never tried before and all of that. So,
well, as a person that loved art when I was growing up, I realized at some point in time that I wasn't going to be a great artist. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to be a mediocre artist for that matter. But I was encouraged. And I think, kids will find their way as long as they're encouraged, mm-hmm. That you'll think, oh, eventually, really, I'm more business minded than I am artistic minded. Mm-hmm. What would you say to a young person that's 7th, 8th grade? Oh, I'm going to be an artist.
I would say just listen to that voice inside mm-hmm. of your head, because I think it's easy to get discouraged. And being in a creative field, you hear no a lot. You apply for a show or a grant or, whatever, and you don't get into schools that you want. Mm. And if you still feel like that call in your heart, like I always felt that call. I knew from a young age that God was mm-hmm. calling me to be an artist, and people around you might tell you no. But if you feel that, you just have to continue to pursue that and not let the rejection get you down, or mm-hmm. the pieces that maybe feel not as successful. Mm-hmm. The artist, you kind of start out like with an idea and you'll be like, this is amazing. And then you'll go through a season of creativity where you're like, this is so bad. Like, oh my gosh, throw it away. And then you get through that season and then you're like, okay, this is kind of okay again. And then you get to the place where you're like, yes, this is successful. And maybe it's not like your favorite thing you've ever done, but you can at least find accomplishment in what you did. So you have to get through that kind of dark season of not feeling great about the work. And if you can sustain yourself through that, there's always like a light at the end of the tunnel, I would say. So just keep going. That's what I would say. Just keep going.
That really kind of meshes well with last week's guest, Coach Herring from Dowling, mm-hmm. talking about the failures in athletics and things, but from a very different vantage mm-hmm. point here mm-hmm. also. So.
Resiliency is like such an important thing, regardless of whether you're in athletics or in a career or friendships or creativity. I think you just have to kind of keep going.
That's a key theme. Our director of counseling services at Catholic Charity, Scott Caldwell, was talking about, in trauma, and I think particularly young people experiencing, how to deepen those resources of resiliency is pivotal, I think, in the healing process and all that's mm-hmm. there. So a therapeutic value to art even. But, you talk about the Dark Valley here. We've kind of had a long wind up, but your experiences of the last half year and plus as well, that even maybe at this time last year, you knew something wasn't quite right.
Right. So maybe it was about March of last year, I started to just not feel super great. I was having kind of weird symptoms that I didn't really understand. I was having headaches. Would get dizzy every once in a while. One of the weird ones that I was having was that I would wake up and I would just be like a pool of sweat, and I didn't know why. And I had just turned 40, so I'm like, well, maybe this is what you're supposed to feel like when you're 40. I don't know. I was super tired all the time, and by the summer, I was home we have 3 kids. The oldest is 10 and the youngest is 4. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just really run down from being home with them and just everyday life. And then in the end of September, the first week of October, I almost passed out somewhere, and then I was super dizzy, and I didn't know why.
Stuff.
It was really scary, and I am one of those who's like, I don't need to go to the doctor. Drink water, eat a banana, you'll be fine later. And I then developed a lump in my neck, and I didn't know why. And so I had asked my dad, the physical therapist, like, hey, did I sleep funny on my neck, or did I do something? And he's like, oh, well, that's not a muscle. That's like something different. You need to go to the doctor. And so I called the doctor, and they did an ultrasound of it. And it came back as a lymph node that was, I can't remember the words they used, but it was like problematic or something like that. And so they decided to biopsy it. And it came back that I had Hodgkin's lymphoma. They eventually, after a bunch of tests, figured out it was stage 2. And so I, all of a sudden, in the short period of a month, had lymphoma. So cancer, that's not really something you expect to have happen to you, at least not when you're 40. I feel like I had been very healthy my whole life. So then I started chemotherapy right after Thanksgiving.
Bang, bang, bang.
Yes, very abrupt.
It was a different Thanksgiving for you.
It was. I look back at that period now, and it was just like you walked. It's like when you're in a line at somewhere, and they just have you go to the next spot, like stand on this check mark, and then you step and go to the next check mark. And that was exactly what it was like. You'd go for this test, and then you'd go for this, procedure, and then, okay, we got to do this before you can start chemo. And then you start chemo, and then all of a sudden you're in this room faced with something very serious that you never really expected to. So it was crazy, like how quickly it all kind of happened.
Now, and trying to check the tendency to consult Dr. Google too, because that can
I am not that person.
The fears.
My husband is, but I am not. But
yeah. So
it was.
But you had a health team that you began to trust very quickly.
Yes, I did. Dr. Steve Hedinger, who's goes to St. Francis with us, was actually my oncologist, and he's wonderful. So I feel like really helped marry the faith and the science, and that was very comforting for me, and I trusted him, and I was very lucky to get to do all of that and go through it, and then be able to then be in remission now.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Praise God, yeah. And surrounded by people, were you transparent in sharing this with people, or did you try and keep it to a close circle?
I feel like I decided that I needed to be authentic, especially on social media. As an artist, you kind of share a lot of your work, you share a lot of your life in terms of doing good and like the cool things that you're working on. And when I got diagnosed, I thought, well, I can't not also share like the challenges of life, because people, a lot of times you see like a very polished, like filtered version of people. And I felt like this was an important time to be honest about what was happening in my life. So I posted about it on social media and shared it with the people that I knew. I didn't probably share a ton, but I tried to be authentic with that I was going through it, that it was hard, and share creativity through that as well. So
did your art change after you got the diagnosis, that it was maybe a little darker or sadder, or was it more hopeful, like, I'm going to get through this?
I feel like looking back at all the work that I created during that time, I was so tired that I didn't really have a lot of time to do really finished pieces. So I started to just sketch, and I started to just kind of be okay with creating something within like a 10 to 20 minute period and having that be enough, and not worry about how good it looked or what it was, and just create for the sake of creating, which I feel like I'd gotten away from. A lot of times you feel like you have to produce, and you have to give something finished and polished. And so during that time, it was like, I got to just make something, both just to be creative and then also to have an outlet for my feelings. And a lot of the work is very colorful. It's very vibrant. And so I don't think I did it intentionally to be hopeful, but I think it ended up being hopeful. So I don't know. I mean, it was more for me a way to cope through the challenge of not feeling well and not worrying about what it needed to be for anybody else.
I mean, you've never had an art therapy class, so you were discovering this, and this is kind of the Spirit kind of working through all of this in a way too. And
it was like a way to pray through the act of creating.
Mm-hmm. Were you mentioned a few moments ago, kind of passing through periods where you don't feel like your muse is assisting you in a way, and that you're kind of absent that, and you don't feel like you're producing something that really captures what you're trying and striving for. Were you liberated from that? Was that something where you were just totally, in it, and I
needed to be in it. I think I needed to let go of maybe the expectation of what I was supposed to be doing, and just allow myself to create, to allow my mind to wander, allow my spirit to be open to what God was sharing with me through this process, whether it was something hopeful or whether it was a promise that I would be able to get through it. It made me connect back to just feeling like myself. It was a way during a time when nothing felt good or right, and you didn't know if you'd feel good in an hour or tomorrow, and everything kind of becomes very moment-centered rather than thinking down the path. What are you going to do tomorrow? What's the schedule look like next week? Where are we going on vacation? Like, you just are kind of in the moment. And so creating the pieces during that time was very much just a way for me to be in the moment, and then with God and in this gift that he gave me, and just being okay with that.
Wow. Yeah. I think we'll just let our listeners pause and ponder that there.
We all need to do that.
Great wisdom.
Yeah. And we just...
I learned that lesson, that being in the present was so important, whether it was creating or whether it was with the time that I was spending with the people in my life. Like, just the moments mattered, and like feeling grateful for whatever the littlest things were. Sometimes it was being able to breathe. Sometimes it was being able to take a walk. Sometimes it was just being able to look outside and see something beautiful. I had a reminder in my phone that would go off I don't remember how often it would go off, but it was, there's beauty in the tragedy. And I needed just to remind myself that even when things are really hard, that there is goodness and there's beauty and there's good people, and you will get through it. Even when it's really hard, there is a light there. And that was something that was really important for me to continue to remind myself of, because I think sometimes when you're in a really challenging place, it's easy to get overwhelmed by that and to feel discouraged. And even now, I still feel like I'm on the, on the upward swing, but there's still physical challenges. There's, things I'm not yet able to do. There's always going to be, it's never going to be perfect, but you have to remember that there's goodness in it and there's beauty in it. And so I'm always searching for that.
Things that are only discovered, a wisdom that comes in passing through and not around in this way. And, I don't know if you had a support group or not, and we're coming up here toward a break here, and hopefully you'll stay with us. But, you mentioned that to me that, you kind of straddled both the St. Joseph Winterset community and St. Francis of Assisi. So did those communities in some way become your support?
Oh, yes. I feel like
at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to be a part of two communities that are very supportive, very loving, very faith-filled. And so, yes, I feel very blessed to have had the group of people surround me and carry me through it, because they really did carry me.
Well, stay with us. Christine Hilbert will be back with us as we wrap up the show today. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
You mentioned the support from the St. Joseph's and the St. Francis of Assisi communities, obviously faith communities there. Was there other kind of support? I mean, your fellow alums from Savannah College of Art and Design, was there kind of an online support where they reached out to you?
Yeah. So, one thing, sometimes the internet is not a great place to be, but I feel like
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. One of the great parts of this was how many people reached out to me and said, I'm praying for you. We're thinking about you. My SCAD friends were great. So I had treatments on Tuesday, and the amount of people who would text me on a Tuesday and say, I'm thinking about you, or one of my good friends from SCAD, she would send me like funny,
the
Savannah College of Art and Design, where I studied painting. She would send me like funny TikToks, so then I could like watch them while I was sitting in like the worst place ever. And just like the thoughtful things that people would do to just remind me that they were thinking about me was something that was so valuable. And it didn't even have to be like anything super monumental, but just like, hey, I'm thinking about you today, or like sending me like a song that they like to listen to. Some of our St. Joe's friends, we had a group thread, and every week they would send like funny pictures of themselves as like kids, or like their wedding photos, or pick a song that they liked. And so it was kind of a theme every week. And that was something that was really wonderful. Just stuff like that was great.
You're kind of a docent in the dimensions of disease and art and how they blend together. Could you teach us or offer us any insights, maybe just for the benefit that, with the best of intentions, sometimes we don't always say helpful things to people. Were there any things there that maybe for our listeners and for myself that things we would maybe not go there? I don't want to wallow in negativity, but
I think the things that people were great at. One of the things I was worried about was that people would stop asking me to do things when I was sick, and feeling like I don't want to bother you. Mm-hmm. And if you just totally isolate the person by not saying anything, that is totally the worst. Like, you feel already not like yourself. And if people just stop inviting you to do things, or telling you things, or including you in things, you feel like even more uncomfortable than you already do. So I would say,
they're just protecting you.
I know, but it's like the worst. I don't know, so that I would say would be something.
I don't want to ask, because I don't want to, they probably don't want to share too much information. So I'll just not say it.
And I think people's intentions are always great, but that always is like the challenge. I don't know. I think that's like the biggest thing. I think if you ask way too personal of questions, that can be bad. But I think just remembering that, having empathy for the fact that there might be a loneliness that comes with this, and just being okay with just saying, hey, how you doing? Checking in is always good. And I'm thinking about you. So that's always a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, as a mother with 3 children, but the reportage about you spoke about a kind of Mother Mary and how her image and her presence in this. Is there a Marian dimension to all this for you?
Yeah. So I love Mary. I wear my medal. I have like 18 portraits of Mary in my studio. I can't ever leave a thrift store or an antique market without a Mary. I think the thing that has drawn me most to her is just the idea. I heard it referenced that she's like the moon. She doesn't shine on her own. She just reflects the light of the Lord. And that is something that I find really beautiful and that I want to kind of take into my life is like my shine isn't mine, it's God's. And so that's something I try to remember. And she's a mother. How can you not love a mother icon that you can look towards and, try to guide your parenting?
Yeah, I just can't leave a statue of Mary or a visual, an image of Mary, in a thrift store. It's like, no, she needs to be elevated.
She's coming home with me.
Yeah.
I'll take her home.
And so roughly around Palm Sunday weekend, the news of the remission.
Yeah.
And your son is saying, when are we having a party?
Yeah, my middle son, that was his first question. So when are we having a party? So,
yeah.
So this weekend we're having a party. So
awesome.
Things to celebrate. There's always good things to celebrate, but especially right now.
And just to enjoy those deep breaths, the magic of small moments and possibilities in days to come. May there be so many rich and abundant possibilities that are unfolding for you. But thank you for taking this time
my pleasure.
And sharing your soul with us, Christine.
Of course.
Well, this has been another wonderful episode, Bishop, of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thank you to our guests and to all of our listeners in Iowa and Nebraska and Wisconsin or wherever you may be listening to Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.